Time to talk about the most dangerous knight in Warhammer 40k. Enter the knight Questor Magaera. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today I thought we'd focus on what is arguably the most powerful knight in the game right now. Knights in Ninth have been having a bit of a rough time. They don't mesh very well with objectives, both primaries and secondaries, and the raw power that they tend to bring to the table just doesn't seem to have been enough to allow them to punch through. However, things might be changing a little bit. A recent winning Imperial Knight GT list did feature two of these guys, and I've also been beaten myself pretty thoroughly by them, played by none other than Pika of the Discord moderators. So in this video I thought we'd go over what makes them quite so strong in game, go over their datasheet, damage output, any obvious buffs that you can get from both Imperial and Chaos Knights, and then just have a general talk about how competitive they are. So here we have the datasheet for the knight Questor Magaera. It is from the Imperial Armor Compendium, though to be honest, if you were to run a regular Questor Knight as it, I think all you'd really need to do is convert some different armament for it, as they basically have the same silhouette. In any case, this critter is 480 points, and has basically the standard Imperial Knight stat line: 12-inch movement, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 8, 24 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 9, and a 3+ save. In durability, it does have one important difference to the standard Imperial Knights. It gets an ionic flare shield rather than just a standard iron shield, and that allows its 5+ invul save to be used in melee as well as against range. It's a really big deal in 9th edition, to be honest. A lot of the biggest threats to knights in melee do come in close combat, so being able to get to a 4+ invul save with rotate ion shields could easily mean the difference between life and death. For weaponry, the knight Magaera is armed with a lightning cannon, phased plasma fusel, Reaper chainsword, and Titanic feet. In general though, I'd always want to swap out that Reaper chainsword for the Hecaton Siege Claw and built-in Rad Cleanser. You just get ridiculously better value out of that, and it costs the same amount of points. So at range, this thing is armed with the trusty lightning cannon. It's 48-inch range, heavy 8 shots, strength 7, AP -2, and damage 3, and whenever you get an unmodified hit roll of 6, you score an additional 2 hits. That means that on average you will get around 8 hits out of this when you're firing at ballistic skill 3+, and it's got a pretty solid generalist profile, enough shots to menace light infantry, and enough damage to deal with heavies. In particular, it could be quite good against Drakari raiders and things, which are likely to be everywhere in big events at the moment. As a secondary weapon, it's got that phased plasma fusel, a rapid-fire 2 24-inch gun, strength 7, AP -3, and damage 2, again really quite generalist, maybe best at killing elite infantry. Finally, for ranged weapons, it has that twin Rad Cleanser, presuming you do take the Siege Claw, which is the obvious pick. That's got a 12-inch range, it's essentially a flamer weapon, with assault 2d6, strength 2, AP 0, and damage 3, but it wounds everything on a 2+, provided it's not a vehicle or Titanic model. This means that this thing can be potentially as strong as a primary weapon in its own right, when it's pointed at virtually any infantry target, or particularly really big monsters and things. Things like greater demons or infantry that are trying to survive based on their toughness are really not going to like getting hit by this thing. Finally, in melee, you're basically always going to be striking with that Hecaton Siege Claw, as it is a flat upgrade on the usually good Titanic feat. It's got 2 modes, Smash and Crush. Crush is aimed for taking out really big heavies and things. You get -1 to your hit roll, it's strength 16, AP -4 and damage 6, and you add 2 to the damage characteristic if you're fighting vehicles or monsters. That's all well and good, but it's the anti-horde smash mode that I think is far more useful. For this one, you straight up treble your attacks, all the way up to 12 attacks base. You hit it at strength 8, AP -2, but you have a big flat damage of 3. It's basically identical to the Titanic feat attacks, but instead of D3 damage, you get a massive 3 damage, meaning that this thing will be pretty effective against chewing through any target, whether it's 3-wound Gravis armoured infantry, or any harder target with multi-wounds. Aside from that, it has all the standard knight special rules, Super Heavy Walker, and the Explode special rule. The Super Heavy Walker can allow it to walk over infantry and swarms, and also still shoot and charge in a turn when it fell back. It means it's going to be hard to either screen this thing out or pin it down. Finally, as if all the damage dealing wasn't enough, it also has Imperial Prey Sight, which means that its ranged attacks ignore cover as well, if you happen to be in light cover. Overall, the Magaera is an all-round powerhouse. It's really quite durable both at range and in melee, has good generalist shooting that's going to put a hurt on anything that it fires at, and is arguably one of the strongest knights out of any knight in melee right now due to that smash attack on the Siege Claw. It's really quite good with dealing the large amount of elite infantry that we're used to having running around in 9th. Just for damage output, All that strength 7 shooting is going to do you around 9 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle or a Drakari raider. That lightning cannon is absolutely monstrous against 3 wound infantry. You'll average around 4 dead Gravis armoured Space Marines, which is really quite significant considering how hard they normally are to shift, though it will be a fair bit weaker against anything that's toughness 8. As we said, that Rad Cleanser is again very helpful against certain targets. Again, that will be another 2 dead Gravis armoured Space Marines, and just generally solid damage against any infantry or Terminators. If you stack enough saves, then some are going to get failed, and those failed saves will really hurt. Finally, I think perhaps the melee is even more impressive than the range damage. That Siege Claw is just very general purpose. You'll average around 4 dead Space Marines or Gravis armoured Marines. Even in smash mode, you're still doing 11 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, and you can potentially get some pretty decent buffs to the damage output in both Imperial and Chaos Knights. So let's talk about a few buffs to the Magaera, both from the Imperial and Chaos Knight perspective. First of all, most Knights do enjoy some general benefits. Rotate Ion Shields for a 4+ invul is a really good use of a command point, particularly in melee against something scary. You can potentially make the chance of explosion really quite high when you're killed if you do happen to be surrounded by enemy units. If you absolutely need to be in melee with something, you could try full tilt and ignore its shooting damage. And with Imperial Knights in the Mechanicus households, Machine Spirit Resurgent is particularly handy. It means that this thing is guaranteed to be fighting and assaulting on max profile until it actually gets destroyed. For a Knight households, as it's basically quite good in shooting and melee, it will be able to make good use out of virtually everything. In general, in 9th edition, people seem to be settling on House Krast as perhaps the most competitive. It allows you full rerolls in the first round of melee, which is a massive boost to that already good damage. And you can combine that with a couple of excellent unique options in the Headsman's Mark for extra damage versus vehicles, or the First Knight for some nice simple reroll ones when shooting. Otherwise though, I think quite a lot of the other Knight households could be very powerful for this. Perhaps Tyrannus for a bit more durability, Raven for those new options in the Charadon book, or one of the Questor Imperialis ones for their combat abilities. Otherwise, there are plenty of other ways to soup the Knight up, including a 4+ invul from Ion Aegis at range, a 2+ armor save from the Armor of Sainted Iron, Knight Seneschal for an extra attack which will translate to a lot more damage in combat, or Landstrider to get them in combat more regularly. The Chaos Knights certainly have their own tricks as well. In particular, they seem to be very strong at making this Knight into an absolute melee powerhouse. The Iconoclast Knight stats get pretty crazy. You'll have 15 attacks at Strength 8, AP -3 and Damage 3 with that Siege Claw. They get +1 attack and -1 AP on the first round of combat, and then you could maybe combine that with one of the Dread household buffs such as Exploding Sixes in melee. With that little combo you can very nearly double the damage of the Knight, and just make it into something that your opponent really can't afford to charge unless they can kill it in one round of combat. Infernal Knights are quite interesting as well. They can potentially overcharge that lightning cannon to give it +1 strength to strength 8 and +1 damage to damage 4. It might cost you a mortal wound or 2 to do that, but that's certainly going to leave a massive mark on whatever it attacks, and is far stronger against toughness 8 things. There's quite a lot of options from the Dread houses. I quite like the custom one that gives you Exploding Sixes in melee, but there are plenty of other options, including extra AP up close. Could be good to help out that Rad Cleanser to give it a pip of AP perhaps, or getting even more armor penetration on the charge. Chaos Knights do have plenty of other options for fun things too. They can get Obsec for a Warlord trait, +1 attack, pick up the Cornate Targets to counter some invul saves and allow you to chew straight through that in melee, and if you're Infernal you can get a 4+ invul save against range as well with one of their relics. So putting this all together, does it actually mean that we'll see the Knight Magaera played commonly in 40k? As I said, the Knights do really have some big disadvantages to overcome. You can quite easily pick up the Titan Hunters secondary. All you have to do is kill 1 or 2 models for a bunch of points, and primary objectives really just don't help models that don't have any objectives secured. Despite this though, we have seen them take 1 tournament win, which I covered on the channel already, and just in terms of raw power they do have quite a lot of things going for them. At the moment, most armies just really aren't focusing on getting loads and loads of anti-tank weapons to deal with Knights right now. In 8th edition, basically everyone was comparing their weapons to whether or not they could down an Imperial Knight, but as people don't play them very much these days, they're far more focused on dealing things like tough elite infantry, like Dark Angels or Death Guard, and now trying to counter all the clusters of light infantry and vehicles that Drakari will bring. Very few armies are going to be able to take down a Knight per turn at range, and they're pretty safe in melee as well with that 4+ invul. It makes them a very hard prospect to charge indeed, as you really need something that's going to actually kill the Knight, otherwise you're going to wind up charging the Knight, having some of your attacks bounce, then maybe having the Knight wipe you out in your own turn. Overall, I feel like these are sort of playing how Imperial Knights might be expected to do well in 9th edition. For the points you get a very efficient unit, really good gemless firepower, really devastating scary melee, though it is in a bit of a race against time, trying to table as much of the enemy army as possible to swiftly win the game, before the enemy scores too many victory points and they lose on objectives. So let me know your thoughts on the Scary Knights down in the comments below. It will certainly be interesting to see if they manage to take any more tournaments, and how they might interact with new Knight books whenever they happen to come out. If you've enjoyed the discussion, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll most certainly keep the 40k content coming out with new videos pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying regularly, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all this content does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry to the prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.